The atomic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a turning point in history. On August 6th and 9th, 1945, two of the most devastating events in human history took place. The cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan were destroyed by atomic bombs, dropped by the United States in the final days of World War II. These bombings changed the course of global warfare, brought unimaginable destruction, and have since been the subject of intense debate. Were these bombings necessary to end the war, or could there have been another way? To answer this question, we must explore the context, the events themselves, and their lasting consequences on the world. Chapter 1. The Road to War. To understand why Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed, we need to look back at the Second World War. In the 1930s, Japan emerged as a major power in Asia. Its imperial ambitions led to invasions of neighboring countries, starting with Manchuria in 1931 and China in 1937. Japan sought to dominate Asia and the Pacific, leading to conflicts with Western powers like the United States and Britain. The United States imposed economic sanctions on Japan, cutting off vital resources like oil. Tensions escalated, and on December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The attack killed over 2,400 Americans and brought the United States into World War II. The war in the Pacific was brutal. Battles like Iwo Jima and Okinawa resulted in massive casualties on both sides. Japanese forces were known for their determination, often fighting to the death. For the Allies, defeating Japan seemed almost impossible without an unprecedented loss of lives. At the same time, a secret project was underway in the United States, one that would change the nature of warfare forever. This was the Manhattan Project. Chapter 2. The Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was the code name for a top-secret U.S. government effort to develop an atomic bomb. In 1939, physicists Albert Einstein and Leo Szilard wrote a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning him that Nazi Germany might be working on an atomic weapon. The United States began its own program, and by 1942, the Manhattan Project was in full swing. Led by General Leslie Groves and physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, the project brought together some of the greatest scientific minds in the world. Research and experiments were conducted in secret facilities across the United States, including Los Alamos, New Mexico. On July 16, 1945, the first successful test of an atomic bomb, known as the Trinity test, took place in the New Mexico desert. The explosion lit up the sky, releasing an energy unlike anything ever seen before. The scientists realized they had created a weapon of unimaginable power. At this point, the war in Europe was over. Nazi Germany had surrendered on May 8, 1945. But in the Pacific, Japan continued to fight. Allied leaders, including U.S. President Harry S. Truman, faced a difficult decision: how to bring the war to an end. Chapter 3. The Decision to Use the Bomb. By mid-1945, Japan was weakened, but its leaders refused to surrender unconditionally. The United States had two options: launch a full-scale invasion of Japan, which could cost millions of lives; use the atomic bomb to force Japan's surrender. President Truman believed that using the bomb would save lives in the long run by ending the war quickly. On July 26, 1945, the Allies issued the Potsdam Declaration, demanding Japan's unconditional surrender. If Japan refused, the declaration promised prompt and utter destruction. Japan ignored the warning. Truman authorized the use of the atomic bomb. Two targets were chosen: Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Chapter 4. The Bombing of Hiroshima. On August 6, 1945, at 8:15 a.m., a U.S. B-29 bomber named the Enola Gay dropped the first atomic bomb, codenamed Little Boy, on the city of Hiroshima. Hiroshima was a military and industrial hub with a population of approximately 350,000 people. In an instant, the bomb exploded with a force equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. The explosion created a massive fireball and intense heat, reaching temperatures of 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Buildings within a 2-mile radius were vaporized. Thousands of people died instantly. Others were burned, blinded, or injured by flying debris. A mushroom cloud rose into the sky, and black rain fell over the devastated city. By the end of the day, nearly 80,000 people had died. Over the following weeks and months, tens of thousands more perished due to radiation sickness, burns, and injuries. Survivors of the bombing, known as hibakusha, described scenes of unimaginable horror: charred bodies, burned children crying for help, and a city turned to ash. Chapter 5. The Bombing of Nagasaki. Despite the destruction of Hiroshima, Japan did not surrender. On August 9, 1945, a second bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki. This bomb, codenamed Fat Man, was more powerful than the one used on Hiroshima. Nagasaki was not the original target. The bomber, Boxcar, was supposed to hit the city of Kokura, but heavy clouds forced a change in plans. At 11:02 a.m., the bomb exploded over Nagasaki. The city was surrounded by hills which limited the destruction. Still, approximately 40,000 people died instantly. Thousands more died in the days that followed. Chapter 6. Japan's Surrender. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki shocked Japan's leaders. On August 15, 1945, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender in a radio broadcast. For many Japanese citizens, it was the first time they had heard the emperor's voice. World War II officially ended on September 2, 1945, when Japanese officials signed the surrender documents aboard the USS Missouri. The use of atomic bombs brought the war to a swift end, but at a tremendous human cost. Chapter 7. The Aftermath and Legacy. The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki left deep scars. Tens of thousands of survivors suffered from radiation sickness, cancer, and other long-term health effects. Cities were rebuilt, but the memories of that day never faded. The events also sparked a global nuclear arms race. The United States and the Soviet Union developed more powerful weapons, leading to the Cold War. To this day, the bombings remain controversial. Supporters argue that the bombing saved lives by ending the war quickly. Critics believe Japan was already close to surrender, and the use of such a devastating weapon was unnecessary.